Hello, everybody. Lighthouse. Well, you've probably been killed here a million times. You've probably been uh, sniped from behind you because somebody spawned and you wanted to kill some rogues because, well, you really didn't have a choice because they were going to gun you down because you're a bear. You've probably been sniped from the chalet or the cottage or the village or pretty much every single place on this map, and you probably didn't even know where it came from right away. So, we're going to do our shooter born in heaven right here in Lighthouse. All right, so one of the first things we got to look at is spawn points. Uh, Spawn points are very much, with any map, are some of the most important things to know about playing this game. Spawn points are basically going to dictate whether or not you're going to get, again, shot from behind, snuck up from behind, whether you're going to get flanked, whether you're going to get beat to a spawn or a loot spawn, whether you're going to, it dictates so much. The maps are just not big enough. And they really can't be. I'd be interested to see if maps change to smaller numbers, but then again, that would mean more servers, and we already know what the desync problems are right now, so it's going to be a little bit tough. We'll have to give it time and see what happens in the upcoming years. But for now, get to know the spawn points. Spawn points are all over the place. This map is very narrow, unfortunately, so spawn points are just going to be right in front of you and right behind you, basically at all times. Depending on what you're doing, if you don't need to go into the water treatment plant, one of the best spawns, in my opinion, to get is the southernmost spawn in the road that goes off to the southern extract. Because, well, that means you got nobody behind you. And if you're really far into the rogue territory, kind of in the mountains but the lakes, that's also a decent spawn. Both these spawns are also very good for Shooter Born in Heaven because, well, if you got nobody from behind, you'll be good. You can also use these spawns for a couple different locations. But thing is, you want to get to know every single one of these spawns and make sure that really you're paying attention to what's around you, because Shooter Born in Heaven is a task that is best done at the very beginning of the raid. Obviously, they are things that you can get done at any part of the raid, especially when you got, players just roaming around doing whatever they want. And maybe you got, new billies running around and they don't know what they're doing, and you see them running from a distance and you just pop them as they're running. But the thing is, most of where I get these kills and most of where I think most players get these kills, especially on maps like Shoreline and Lighthouse and maybe not Reserve. Reserve might be one of the only other ones, but Woods is a good one too. You're going to get these kills right at the beginning of the raid and within the first 10 minutes. So let's look at some of the spots that I've picked out for everybody. If you want to know more about what guns I'm using and why I'm using them, make sure to look over at the previous video, the Shoreline and Customs videos, because I go a little bit more into depth. I know that those videos are long. I'm going to try to make this a lot shorter because you guys just want to know the spots, let's be honest. All right, so let's look at spot number 1, because this map is so long and narrow, we can't really go into too much. I spent more time looking into this map than I have any other map. Granted, there's not a whole lot to cross-reference yet. I think people are having trouble doing it on this map. I put a poll in the YouTube channel a little bit ago. A lot of people wanted Woods, but definitely a lot more people wanted to see how to do Lighthouse, because Lighthouse is one of those maps that is not very difficult to figure out. In fact, it's extremely easy to figure out how to navigate the map. But getting the Shooter Born in Heaven is a very, very tricky situation because, well, let's be honest, you are going to be dealing with a lot of things pretty much within 100 meters. Obviously, 125 meters is a new one, but you're going to be dealing with things within 100 meters. Unless you're dealing with rogues, then you're pretty far off, but those don't count. Well, you got to do a couple tasks to shoot things in there, but for the most part, those just don't count. One thing to line up as well is trying to get the quests that will give you the task to shoot 20 PMCs on the opposite faction of you. That might help you as well. If you're a bear, which more than likely you are, you got to shoot some USECs. If you USEC, you got to shoot some bears. I think getting the USEC task is done much more easily, but I don't think that's required for Kappa anyway. So if you don't want to do that and you're going for Kappa, don't worry about it. But our first spot, let's go to our first spot. We're going to go to the mountain that overlooks the lighthouse. So, like I said before, the southernmost spawn, southern road spawn, will give you the best opportunity for this. Obviously, there is another spawn on the other side of the road near the beach that goes to the lighthouse as well. If you can take that spawn out, or that spawn can take, if you spawn there and you take this one out, you will have a pretty good chance at seeing a bunch of different things. So there's a couple of options, and this might be something that is a lot more useful when people start figuring out that there is tons and tons and tons of loot on the lighthouse, actual like peninsula there. One of the big things right now is because Lightkeeper isn't there yet, there aren't a bunch of people going. But I'll tell you right now, here's a little secret. There's tons of loot. There is simply tons and tons and tons of loot. In fact, if you can get a spawn that gives you a Southern Road extract, you might want to just try to get to the lighthouse, not as quickly as you can, but eventually, and get back and just leave. Because frankly, if you're one or two people, you'll get enough loot to fill your bags and then some, and then be able to get out. You don't need to go to the water treatment center or the industrial center to get a bunch of stuff. And I'm telling you this because it's good information, but also because, well, if I tell more people, hopefully they'll go to this peninsula and you'll be able to get your shooterborns done. There's a couple things here. So in the mountain that overlooks it, basically right next to the spawn, the big mountain on the road that the road curls around, there's a couple different spots here. You can see all the way down to the beginning of the actual lighthouse building itself. So anything beyond this is really, really solid. There's a couple of markers. For the most part, you're pretty far away. While this map is very narrow and long, but it seems like, it seems small, right? If you look at the map, it seems pretty small. But the thing is, it's quite a big map, and it takes a little bit of time to traverse. So there's a lot of distance to be traveled, which means that there's a lot of distance for your bullet to travel, well over 125 meters in many cases. So anything down this road, really, past some of these trucks, will be 125 meters, and if you line up directly parallel, or at least down, if you're looking down the road from the lighthouse, most of these shots are pretty easy to hit because they'll more than likely be running in a straight line. But, like I said, you probably want to hit your first shot. Like I said in previous videos, I haven't said that yet, but you want to hit your first shot as best as you possibly can. And don't forget to bring a rangefinder. Look at, and if you're gonna work with, you're not gonna want to use a rangefinder where the person is all the time, but start to find markers along the road and say, hey, this is 150 meters. Hey, this is 200 meters. Hey, this is 250 meters. If you mark those, you'll be able to range properly. And if you need to use your mil dots instead of, tabbing up and down, which is what I do, I use my mil dots. I have the tab up and down function on my mouse, so it's not that hard to get to. However, I'd much rather not want to fiddle with that and use my mil dots properly. Depending on the mil dot, it's usually every 50 meters, sometimes it's every 100 meters, sometimes it's every 25 meters. Look up the scope. The scope will tell you. So if you can say, hey, this is about 100 meters, this person's out another 50 meters past that, now I can just shoot at the mil dot right underneath it, and you'll be able to take that. So take that shot here. Okay, now across the way on the lighthouse itself, there are two different spots here. They look at very different locations. So if you have a partner, set one up on each. It's pretty good. This is also a good spot to just like kind of sit here, camp here for like maybe 15 minutes and try to get some shooterborns. And if you can't get any shooterborns, or you do get shooterborns, then you can go loot the whole island yourself too. So it's really a good spot to just kind of chill out. So the first spot is going to be actually on the mountain that looks at the beach of the actual mainland. Because one, you can see a whole bunch of stuff, right? You can see everything. The big part is that a lot of people will be running horizontal to you, which makes these shots very difficult. This is where leg meta comes in. You may want to take a leg out and slow somebody down. And well, if you're shooting a bolt action, it's not too difficult, right? Compared to like a DMR, because this is a big shot. Some of these are like 300-meter shots. So take a bolt action, get that accuracy down, take out a leg if you need to, and this is where like M80s and maybe M62s will come into play. I would say M80s is probably the way to go if you're going to be using a DMR, but if you're going to be using a sniper rifle, or I should say, they're They have bolt. The M700 is one of my favorite weapons, and that shoots M80s as well. But if you're using something different, something that doesn't have a high fracture chance, if you're using like a SVD, most of that ammo does a lot of damage. They shouldn't one shot to the thorax, but some do have fracture chances that will crit to their thorax and destroy them. But the biggest thing you want to see is something that does just a high amount of damage to not necessarily armor, but flesh, because you'll know a couple different things. If you shoot and they don't react at all, more than likely you either hit them in the thorax or you didn't hit them at all, right? Or they have a painkiller, but most people that run on the beach don't really do that too much. So if you hit him in the leg, you'll know. If you hit him in the head, you'll know. Giving yourself that knowledge of what you're hitting is so important in situations like this because of how far away they are. So if you're able to hit somebody in the leg while they're moving, more than likely you want to get them into walking speed, not a sprint speed. It'll be nice, and then you can try to pop them there. Second spot is going to be on the other side, the tall mountain. So I'm going to show you something that is less risky than this spot already shows, because this spot is risky, and it's something to pay attention to. This spot is very risky because one thing you have to worry about on the Lighthouse Island itself, and again, once Keeper comes into play, it's going to be a very different thing, but right now as I'm recording this video, he's not there, so do what your heart contents and what your heart desires. On this mountain is where some rogues will spawn, some scavs will spawn, player scavs will spawn over here, so it can get very dangerous, but for the most part, as long as you clear that quick, you're okay. So get on this mountain and look through the mountain in the box area here. The reason for this is because it looks all the way down the road and you're not making a huge silhouette. If somebody knows to look here, you're probably in trouble, but the likelihood of somebody looking here automatically or quickly before you're able to actually take them out is highly unlikely, in my opinion. So take this spot, make sure to go prone, and they can't see you, and you'll be able to look at a lot. Obviously, if you need more range of motion or range of sight, you can move around. There's a ton of space up here. Just remember that every time you're in a crouched or standing position, you're going to silhouette like crazy, and people are going to see you from a mile away. So take these shots. They're not bad. Okay. Next spot we're going to look at is what we're going to call, I don't know, Pride Pebble. Not Pride Mountain, but Pride Pebble. Or King Mountain, whatever you want to call this. It's right in the middle of the map. It overlooks everything. This is one of the more central locations for most of where players are going to be. Obviously, Pride Rock is even more central towards when you put the water treatment into play. But this, as far as spawns go, because there's two spawns, one on either side, are more than likely going to be the hottest zones. I don't like being up here because, again, it's right in the center, and you're more of a target than you are a shooter. But if you're willing to take the bet that somebody's going to shoot at you and miss, that gives you a lot of information on where to look, right? So if you can take the spot up here, there's a couple of spots where you can see directly into both chalets, but you can also look at a couple of spawns. So obviously you have the spawn at the beach, and you can kind of see over towards the lighthouse and the lighthouse road, but the most important part is actually to look over towards the helicopter and the campfire. You can't see it super well, but you can see people moving every now and then, and you'll see people passing if you pay close attention. Getting these shots will be pretty much impossible, but it'll give you information on who's coming from what spawn, and that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to kind of deal with something. This also gives you that information that somebody's probably going to be at the chalet at some point. That's when you want to pay attention. I'm talking about the chalet that's got the tennis court attached to it, because that it will have fewer scavs for players to deal with, so they might be on lower alert. And if you can get them while they're running out the cliff side, you can probably get a couple of shots there. And you can maybe be able to catch a couple players sleeping as they're trying to scope towards these mountains, because they're like, oh, I'm up here, I might as well look. Boom, that's when you put one right in their forehead. This is a very dangerous spot, but it's kind of popular, but I would say this is a safer spot than our next spot. I'm not going to go into this next spot super long. I mean, it's the main spot. It's where everybody's going to be. It's one of the more popular spots in the game. Not only in this map, but in the game. Everybody goes here. It's basically Sniper Mountain in woods. So look here, look around, use it to your advantage. Just be very careful because it is open. There's really not a whole lot of leeway. You're gonna get shot at if people know you're there or even think you're there. So either stay moving around or prone in a weird position. I would not recommend this spot, but if you want to come up to Pride Rock, do it. You can see everything. You can legitimately see everything. That's why it's called Pride Rock. Okay. This next spot is actually across the street over at the chalets. We're gonna look at the cottage, the bigger one that's not attached to the tennis court, the other one, the blue one. Behind it is a bunch of mountains that you can traverse. It's actually extremely traversable. There's a bunch of things up there. It also means there's a lot of players that travel there, sometimes player scavs and stuff like that, so you may have to watch your back. Again, with all these quests, it's good having a partner, but I would say that it's much easier to escape danger, or at least avoid danger, if you're a solo. So if you're a solo player, don't feel afraid of having that happen, and don't feel afraid of thinking that you got your back against the wall when you're playing solo while doing this quest. In fact, I think this quest is kind of easier as a solo because you don't have to worry about somebody snaking your kill. You don't have to worry about somebody else making noise and keeping you exposed or not hidden. It's actually not too terrible to do as a solo player versus some of the other ones that are more group oriented. Like going to mark stuff and going to clear out zones it's not fun as a solo. I've done all these quests solo, but I much prefer them in a duo or a trio because having somebody watch your back while you're super exposed is nice. But this is a sniper quest, so having a duo that likes to spot things or is very good at spotting things with their communication skills is very, very important for a lot of people. However, like I said, I don't think you need it necessarily. You can do this all on your own, and I say that because you're going to need to use your ears if you're going to be using these spots. This next spot I'm talking about. So we're going to move up the mountain range, past it, towards closer to the water treatment center. There is actually a couple of ranges that go down toward the convenience store in the village, and they can see a lot of that stuff. The reason I'm showing you this is because you can. It's kind of like it has a very similar vision to Pride Rock, except for behind you. But in most cases, you're not going to need to look behind you, at least at long range. You can look over the chalet. You look down at the bridge, which is big because if you're able to get down to the bridge early, or look down at the bridge early, you'll either have USECs crossing the bridge, you'll have bears trying to get on the left side of the bridge, and sometimes if a lot of players are under fire on the left side of the bridge from Pride Rock or from somewhere else, they will cross the road. That's your opportunity to start taking shots at that crossing of the road. But you also see Pride Rock. You also see over the village. There's a lot of trees, so over the village is a little bit difficult, but you can see a lot here. You can also use this to your advantage if you're maybe running left of the chalet or around the chalet and you start getting shot at. You come up here, there's a good chance that players won't expect you to move up. Granted, players who know what they're doing will probably look at it, but you can take a couple of different spots that aren't super obvious and take a look over. There's also a couple of spots where if they're not necessarily on Pride Rock itself, you're kind of covered. That chalet has you covered a bit. So use that to your advantage and take a couple of shots here. This happens to be, I think this is a very popular spot for streamers. Somebody correct me there. I think I've seen a lot of people get it done from here. But these are cool spots. These are spots that if you get shot at, you have a nice retreat without anybody knowing which direction you went. But two, you also don't have to expose a lot of your body when taking a lot of these shots because there's a lot of crevices you can tuck most of your body into. So if somebody's going to hit you, they have to hit you in the head, basically. So take this to your advantage and use it as you will. All right. This next spot is a little cheeky. This next spot is, when I found it, it's not that crazy. I'll preface. When I found it, though, I use this as a secondary spot, I'll say. Maybe secondary to the last spot we just showed you. When I found this spot, I sat here and said, oh, this is how I've been killed at least twice on Pride Rock. because I've been on Pride Rock several times, and I've gotten into fights with people at the chalet and the cottage, and I sit here going, how? And there's like 3 of us on this mountain. I'm like, I'm hidden pretty much, and and we're scanning this whole place. I never saw where they were again. Now, could be desync, somebody peeking around the corner real quick because they know exactly where I am, or they were in this exact spot. There's a couple of rooms that go pretty deep, but this one is dirty. So from here, you can prone out kind of. You can crouch a little bit, but you can go deep into this room, and the likelihood of somebody spotting you if they don't know you're in there is very, very low. So essentially, if you hear somebody moving around or shooting around at Pride Rock, or you see somebody shooting around anywhere near there, really, because you can kind of take advantage in a couple different ways, jump on some furniture, what have you. You can do what snipers do, which is go deep into a room, use the shadow to your advantage, use the lighting distance kind of weird rendering to your advantage, and be able to look out through these windows and use this chalet or the cottage in this instance, to take some pretty nasty shots. There's not much to see here other than what you can see, basically, if you understand what I'm saying. Basically, if you're in here, you know why you're in here. If you're in here at the beginning, it's not terrible, but I wouldn't use this as a primary spot. I would use this as a secondary spot that you retreat to later, or you move after you take a shot. Shoot, move, shoot, move. The reason I say that is because if somebody's approaching you, they won't necessarily know you're there if you're not making any movement, but you're not going to fully know how to fight them all the way. They can pop right into your room sometimes when you can't even hear them. And if you can hear them, it's sometimes hard to tell where they are exactly. So if you're feeling chatty and maybe you brought a second gun, or you got like some type of just automatic Glock or APS or something like that, and you just want to go after them, you can do that. This is also where the rogue bosses spawn, so be careful when approaching this. If you don't hear them going off, they're usually pretty obvious when they spawn, but if you don't hear them going off, you're probably safe here. Use this spot to your advantage, and if you want to be a little ghost, yeah, you can use that too. Be a little demon. But yeah, use this chalet as interestingly as you can. There's a couple different ways to use this, but from here and what I'm showing you now, it's a pretty cheeky spot to take an angle on some of the Pride Rock guys. Okay, final spot. Final spot's going to be on the other side of the village from the chalets, up the mountain. A couple of things about this. There are a couple of spawns that are pretty close. As you saw on the map earlier, there's 4 spawns here, but how the spawns work, usually, they won't spawn 2 right next to each other. So, the likelihood of you spawning right next to someone is very, very low. Not impossible though, but very low. The likelihood of you spawning 1 step over or 2 steps over from here is pretty likely. So when you spawn here, or if you make it to here, be very careful. Try to take out the close person as quickly as possible. But if you can get up the mountain, a lot of the movement here is pretty much 125 meters. What you can see here, especially even if you look straight down into the village or across one of the bridges, is 125 meters. There's a lot of space there. Like I said about this map is unexpectedly big. There's a lot of terrain to travel, and with the higher up you go, that's more distance for your bullet to travel to, which means that it's likely that you'll get that shooter-borne kill. You also have to recognize that the higher up you are, the less bullet drop you have to account for, because how I understand this game to use bullet travel is it's based on horizontal distance only, I think. And obviously there's some math to it as to how it would work in the real world, but basically how you want to calculate how the game does it, it's essentially horizontal distance. So if you're shooting like at, essentially almost straight down, but it's like 125 meters, you basically want to zero to the lowest you possibly can, because you're only shooting like a couple meters out, or like, at most 50 meters out. So just shoot straight down with your lowest ranged part of the scope. So essentially use that to your advantage, and shoot anybody that's roaming around the village. I would say some experienced Lighthouse players, but not so experienced that they want to go loot, you know, water treatment or anything like that, will roam this village. Some of them probably have very expensive keys to the mountain house and some of the places around here. So taking advantage of those guys will work. You can also see a little bit of the bridge crossing, but for the most part, what you're going to be doing here is you're pretty much gatekeeping anybody coming for rogues. This is a big spot for bear rogue killers, meaning people who are playing bears. It's much easier to kill rogues as a bear from these mountains than it is as a USEC from the beach side. You can still do it from the beach side, but it's much easier from these mountains. So you're basically gatekeeping. The problem with this is you're gonna have it's a high traffic area for that reason specifically. So carrying a second weapon that's fully automatic or carrying a DMR for this situation is also very important because, well, you may want to take those close range fights. So be careful here. Use this as best you can, and I think you can get some really nice stuff. Be aware though that there are spawns like essentially within these mountains. So if you're somebody who spawns at the bottom of it or around it, you might be approaching somebody pretty quick. The likelihood of them coming to you is very low because they'll probably be moving forward because they have the best spawn to kill rogues with. But you still want to pay attention to that, especially if you're using a somewhat loud weapon, because as soon as they hear that, they're going to turn around and look at you. So take this to your advantage. And if you want to show up here later, that's not bad either. Maybe you spawn in the village itself and you want to push these guys in the mountain and kind of look back. I will say also this is a very popular location for people to snipe too, because they know the traffic area or the traffic is very hot. So, you know, be careful. Like everything in this map, there's bad guys everywhere. Scavs spawning at 38 minutes and higher sometimes. Rogues that'll spot you from a mile away. Snipers everywhere. Scavs that are also right next to you in the chalets, and just players coming from all different directions. So while this map is very difficult, use these spots as best as you can. Let me know how this works. This map is not something I'm super familiar with. I know it pretty well. I know basically all the spots to kind of look at, and some of the major loot spots. I would say I know like 80% of the major loot spots. But there's still a lot I don't know. There was a lot of caches added to this map in this wipe, so those I don't know either. This map's fairly new to me, and considering it's not my favorite, I don't play it a ton. I played it a good amount though. And yeah, so let me know in the comments how it worked for you, and if you have any feedback on some of these spots, or if you have other spots you want to share with us. Maybe you want to keep those a secret. Obviously, I understand that, but I hope you got some good information here, and I want everybody to get Shooterborn done. It's a very annoying task to get done when you are given an even harder version of that task, right? So once again, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it. My name is Danotage, and if you enjoyed this, please give it a like. We've been doing really well, and if I can hit 100 likes on this video, we'll get the second one out even faster. Or not the second one, but the next one, which will probably be Woods, by the way. So Woods, and then we have to finish up with Reserve. Reserve should be pretty easy for me. I know Reserve like the back of my hand. So thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you, and please have a good day. Goodbye.